Hello, dear learners. Welcome to teaching learning session of sociology. In our last session, we discussed the unit 1 of BSOE 143, that is environmental sociology, nature and scope. Today, we discuss realist and constructionist debate and some key concepts of environment sociology. What is realism and what is this debate? Realism, popularly known as an approach in social sciences, which refers to certain theoretical assumptions and methodological concerns about reality. One of the major characteristics of realism is the assumption that the world, with all its structures, events, and phenomenon, exists independent of human experience, consciousness, and perception about it. So, according to realism, that the whole world, with its structure, with its event, with its phenomena, exists independent of human intervention, human experiences, consciousness, and perception about it. And the second, the realist approach to the knowledge believes that the world as it exists can be known through human senses, observation, and hence we can know the world, measure its nature, identify its mechanism and their way of working, and thus predicts event. So, first theoretical approach is that all the structure of the world, events exist without human consciousness and intervention, but a human can observe, can measure the nature of the events of the structure of this world, and by this mechanism of they can predict the events. This work on assumption that there is an objective reality out there which we can study, explain, and examine. So, according to a realist, we can examine this world objectively. Realism in environmental sociology. So, a realist approach is based on the objectivity. Environmental sociology has witnessed heated arguments between proponents of two major approaches, that is, social constructionism and realism. There are the two approaches of environmental sociology. First is social realism, and another is social constructionism. It acquires a particular significance in environmental sociology since the discipline deals with the questions of nature society relationships, environmental changes, social interaction with environments, and so on. Realism has been applied to study of nature widely. When you want to study the nature widely, then realism has been applied. Realists take the point that the analysis, examination, and formulation of concepts related to nature, environment actually refers to environmental reality and aid in formulating environmental policy. So, according to realists, that the analysis, examination, and the formulation of concepts which are related to the nature should actually refers to the environment reality. And when we observe the environmental realities, it will helps us in forming the policies, the real policies, environmental policies. Scholars like Ted Benton, Patrick Peter Dickens, and Raymond Murphy follow a realist perspective. According to these scholars, the realist model helps in examining the aspects, events, and practices of natural world and its implication for social institution and vice versa. Through realistic approach, according to Ted Benton, Peter Dickens, and Raymond Murphy, according to the realistic model, that this model helps in examining the events and the practices of the natural works of the natural world, and how these events and the practices impacts the social institution and how the social institution impacts the nature. Both, that is, nature impacts the social institution society, and society impacts the nature. So, according to the scholars of realist, they said that through this model, realist model, we can understand the impact and implication of environment on society and implication of society on environment. Realist ask the questions: what is the truth about the environmental issues, and what causes this phenomena? What are the reasons behind this phenomenon? Why this is occurring? And they look forward for the findings. A causal relationship or a causal explanation of any environmental issue, problems, or phenomena. Realists try to find out the cause for any phenomenon because they ask the question, what is the reason behind this, or what causes this phenomenon? They try to find out the answers for this. They try to find out the causal relationship or the causal phenomena behind, causal reason for behind any phenomenon. According to Ted Benton, any understanding of nature includes not just the humans, but also life, actions, and context of non humans, other objects, living beings, ecosystems, and entities of the biospherical world. According to Ted Benton is a realistic scholar. So, according to him, that if you want to understand the nature, then it includes not only the human beings. Nature includes non-living thing, living thing other than the human beings. It includes ecosystems. It includes the entities of other entities of biophysical world. So nature is not just made up of human beings. It is made up of from many other entities, human beings, other living things, non-living things, and ecosystem and other entities of biophysical world. So it is very important to understand each and every aspect if one really wants to understand the nature. Realist stresses the idea that the global environment crisis due to heavy industrialization is real in nature, effects and implication for nature and society. According to a realist, industrialization is one of the major reason for changes or for the effect for the impact. This industrialization impacted the nature, and in another way it impacted the society. So global industrialization is one of the main reason for environmental crisis according to realist. So industrialization impacted the nature as well as the society. Nature and its dynamics are not simply socio-cultural perception concepts or categories. They exist with their own autonomous characteristics and functioning. Nature has its own autonomous characteristics and functionings. Although the socio-cultural perception impacts the nature, but they are not simply so these dynamics, that is the socio-cultural uh, perception, not only impacts the dynamics of the nature, but This nature has its own autonomous characteristics and functioning. Nature has its own functioning, capacity, and dimension of existence, which are obviously in interaction with the human world. Although nature is autonomous, but it interacts with the human world. Raymond Murphy discusses the material aspect of the natural world and their implication for human society. Raymond Murphy, again a realistic scholar, discusses the material aspect of the natural world and their implication on the human society. How the materialistic world, how the material aspect of the nature impacts the human society. Realists are of the opinion that one should not discard the nature and its structures processes in understanding the human environmental interrelations. Critics of the realist approach. Realist tends to overlook the cultural aspect of the reality reality through which people perceive and interpret the natural world or the nature world. According to realist, socio-cultural dynamics is not only the dynamics which impact the nature, and critic criticized this. They said, according to critics, the realist overlooked the cultural aspect of reality. Due to their biological and material biases, realists are not paying attention to the social process of meaning making. Constructionism. The other phenomenon is constructionism. What is constructionism? Constructionism is one of the very popular approach in the field of social sciences. It helps us exploring what we know, how we know anything about the world we inhabit. So, constructionists ask the questions. They explore the world. That they ask the questions: what we know and how we know about that. Constructionist approach primarily denies the existence of external objective, singular reality, which is independent of human perception about it. According to realists, nature exists without human perception, human consciousness. But according to constructionists, that they denies the singular identity, which is independent of human perception. They denies the existence of external objectives. According to realists, we can study the nature objectively, but constructionists deny the existence of external objectives, and they deny the singular reality, which is independent of human perception about the nature, while realists said that we can study the nature objectively, and this nature exists independent of the human perception and the consciousness. It stresses the significance of social perceptions, conceptions, ideas, knowledge that help people to understand their world. According to constructionist, social perception, social conception, ideas, knowledge, they are very important and they help the people to understand their world. So nature cannot exist without human consciousness. This change was broadly referred to as interpretative turn emerging in 19th century with the writings of William Delthe and Max Weber. As we all know that Max Weber has given the concept of interpretative sociology. So, constructionists believed in interpretative sociology. Sociologists focused on understanding the meaning humans ascribed to their experiences and action in this world. According to constructionists or according to sociologists, that the human experiences and actions associated with their this word with their experiences is very important, and sociologists focused on the understanding of the human actions and their experiences, how experiences impacts the action of human beings. They try to understand this is each individual, according to them, constructs the knowledge through social perception, social interaction, ideological worldview, and shared understanding of the realities. This paradigm differs from realist one in its emphasis on understanding human context, that is, their social origin, value system, interest, socialization that shape how people perceive any issue or problem. So there is a difference between realist and the constructionist. According to constructionist or the constructionist emphasize on the understanding of human context, that is that is the how the human being or how the people perceive any issues or the problem, and their perception depends on their value system, their perception depends on their socialization, their perception depends on their culture, their perception depends on their social origin and the interest. So you cannot make the nature and the human perception or the human being or the society as a different entities. According to constructionist, both interact, that is the nature and human society interact with each other, and both are dependent on each other. They cannot survive in isolation or aloof. You cannot separate, one cannot separate the nature and human society. Both that is the society and nature interact with each other, and there is an interdependence between the nature and the society. Constructionists argue that nature doesn't present itself in an unmediated form and always requires interpretation, mediation of social meaning, constructions, discourses about it. That is what I explained. It is centered on the idea that human knowledge is socially constructed and not passively received from environment. So this idea is based this is based on the idea that human knowledge is socially constructed and not passively received from the environment. How human gains the knowledge through socialization process. Culture plays an important role in this. So this is based on the idea that human knowledge is socially constructed, and this knowledge is not passively received from the environment. Constructionism in environmental sociology. Constructivists argue that environment is socially constructed. It is opposite to realists. According to constructionists, the environment is socially constructed. Instead of taking any claim about environment for granted, a social constructionist perspective would try to situate in a given social cultural context. So society and culture impacts the nature or the environment. So environment is socially constructed. At the heart of social constructionist approach is the idea that environmental realities are deeply shaped by historical practices, political interest, and cultural perception. So, political interest, politics, culture, and historical practices plays an important role in environmental realities. These shape up the environmental realities. So one cannot differentiate, one cannot say that nature exists without society or it is an independent entity. Environment is not an independent entity. The culture, the politics, and the historical practices impacts the nature. A social construction perspective is able to demonstrate that concern over the loss of biodiversity have been socially constructed at different level in the society, and these processes can be analytically studied. If there is any issue, any problem, or any loss of the biodiversity, then this have been socially constructed at a different level in the society, and this process can be analytically studied why there is a loss in the biodiversity, how society impacted the environment, and how environment impacted the society. Constructionists stress on examining the process through which certain ecological discourses become hegemonic over others and thus restrict the public awareness about overall situation. They constructionists actually stressed on examining the process through which certain ecological discourses become very important over other. They gain more attention than other, and they restrict the public awareness about the overall situation. What is the overall situation? They restrict the public awareness about the other. Why this happened? The why and how this happened, right? How this ecological discourses, how this happens that these certain facts or these certain problems or the certain ecological discourses become important, and they restrict, and those problems restrict the public awareness about the overall situation. Why pollution, why air pollution become an important aspect or important problem, and it restricts the public awareness about overall situation. What is the overall situation? So according to constructionist, it is very important to examine the process, how it happens and why it happens, that certain problems gain more attention than the other problems. Social constructionism can be extremely valuable approach for sub-discipline, since it stresses the central task for sociologists to examine and interrogate the ways in which any environmental issue is generated and brought before the people in society. So, this approach, social constructionism, is very important approach, is very valuable approach. Why it is a valuable approach? Because it stresses to examine and interrogate the ways in which any environmental issue is generated, why any environmental issue is generated, how this environmental issue has been generated. They try to find out the reason behind it. These constructionists, according to this these constructionism, it is important to understand and examine and interrogate the ways in which environmental issues is generated, what are the reasons behind the generation of the environmental issues, and it brought before the people in the society so that they can take care of the environment, because without environment this society cannot exist, because environment and society Both are interdependent, they depend on each other. So it is very important, according to constructionist, to understand to understand and interrogate the ways in which any environmental issue is generated, why any issue has been generated, what are the reasons behind it, and how can we control those issues, and make it public so that public can take the actions whatever is required. Critics of social constructionism. Constructionists avoid and ignore talking about direct solutions and actions. This approach ignores the talking about the direct solutions and actions. They say that it is very important to understand and interrogate the reason behind any environmental issues, but they ignore talking about the direct solutions and action, what action should be taken, and they just said that bring it before the public and brought it before the public, but they ignores they talking about the direct solutions and the actions. Opponents argue that at times when urgent action is required, constructionists appeal for the understanding social meaning attached to the specific environmental issues by different people. Because constructionists believe in interpretative sociology. According to them, it is very important to understand the reason and action behind any environmental problem. So, opponent argued that at the time of emergency, rather than taking or providing the solutions and the action, constructionists appeal for understanding the social meaning attached to the specific environmental issues. It delays in building any concrete political position on the issues, because they, according to them, it is very important to understand or interpret the reason behind any social environmental issues. So it delays building any concrete political position. Without political will, one cannot overcome any of the problems. Undermine the vitality of sociological imagination by indulging in relativism and contributing to some sort of fictional narrative about environment. So, according to critics, the constructionists undermine the vitality of sociological imagination. Why? Because of fictional narrative. According to them, they have given some fictional narratives about the environment. Realists critic constructionists for asserting that nature and reality are just mental constructs. According to critics, this view undermines the legitimacy of the argument that environmental problems are real and thus deserve urgent attention. According to realist critics, they criticize the constructionist that, according to realist critics, that these constructionists assert that nature and reality is just a mental construct. It's all in mind. According to constructionists, it's all in mind. They are just the mental constructs. The nature and reality are the mental constructs, and because of this, um, they undermines actually the environmental problems and the real issues, which results which deserves the urgent attention. So because of constructionist, the urgent attention towards any environmental problem, it delays the required attention, because according to constructionist, it's all in mind. It's a mental construct. Key concepts. Now we'll discuss about some key concepts of environmental sociology. Environmental sociology has emerged as a crucial subfield of study in social sciences. It is one of the important subfield because society and environment are interdependent. The existence of society depends on environment. It aims to study, examine, and explain the interrelationship between human world and the natural world. Environmental sociology tries to explain the relationship between the human society, human world, and the natural world, how they are interdependent, how they are interrelated. Much before its global emergence, Radha Kamal Mukherjee and Patrick Giddens highlighted the connection between the social life and ecological work in Indian context. We discussed about the Radha Kamal Mukherjee in our previous lectures. So, before the global emergence of environmental sociology, Radha Kamal Mukherjee and Peter Geddes highlighted the connection between the social life and the ecological world. Radha Kamal Mukherjee wrote extensively on the ecology. So they highlighted the connection between the human world and the ecological world, specifically in Indian context. In 1920s, Mukherjee talked about region as a key concept to understand the synthesis of ecology and the social world. Scholars working in this field strongly emphasize that society is significantly dependent on the natural environment. Obviously, human society is significantly dependent on the natural environment because nature provides us the resources which we require for this survival, whether tangible resources or intangible resources. So, human society or this society is significantly dependent on the natural environment. It studies the way in which ecology is connected to human institutional lives, the social and environmental problems that have emerged with developmental process. Because society is dependent on the environment, we get resources from the environment. And environmental sociology studies the way in which ecology is connected to the human institutional lives and how social and environmental problems that have emerged as a development process as because of the development, because of the industrialization, various types of social and environmental problems emerged, like environmental problems like pollution, social problem like poverty, social problems like um, development of slums, environmental problems like diseases, unknown diseases. So, this environmental sociology studies about the interconnection between the human society and the um, um, this environmental problems. They stress to examine the way in which environmental hazards and disasters have socially and cultural consequences. How do they impact the inequalities along the racial and class lines? They don't only study about the interrelationship between the human society and the interdependence between the human society and uh, environment. Uh, the, uh, the scholars tried to explain or stressed to examine the way in which environmental hazards and disasters have socially and culturally impacted the human society, and how they impact the inequalities along racial and the classical lines and class lines. All are not equally impacted because of some problems, because of some environmental problem. These environmental problem impact the inequalities along the racial and the class lines. Poor suffers a lot more than anyone else. Uneducated suffers more than the educated ones. Since its origin in 1970s, environmental sociology has focused on explaining the mutual relationship between society and environment via the application of general sociological concepts and terms. Environmental sociology focused on examining the relationship between the human society and the environment, between the society and the environment, by applying the general sociological rules and the concepts. Classical sociology ignored the significance of biophysical aspect of environment and focused on social and institutional aspects only. Yes, when we talk about the classical sociology just talked about the institution, about the social institutions, and about the society, about the values, about the norms. That is the social and institutional aspects only. They ignore the biophysical aspect of the environment. The classical sociology never tried to explain or never focused on the interrelationship between the environment and the society, how environment impacts the society and how society impacts the environment. The classical sociology just talked about the institutional aspects, about other social aspects like values, norms, and other aspects. Gradually, with the growth of environmental sociology, scholars started exploring a new relationship between environmental and social life. That is, this environmental sociology has emerged as a discipline in around 1970s. During 1970s, people started thinking about the biophysical aspect of the environment, and this environmental sociology, the scholars of the environmental sociology started exploring the relationship between the environment and the society. The term environment is redefined with a specific set of meaning in the field. In general, the term environment refers to social, physical surroundings of any organization. People, places, things, trees, land, sky, hills, water bodies, etc. constitutes the environment. This is what the environment is. That is the people, places, land, hills, water, air, trees. All these are the environment. Social, physical surrounding. That is the social and the physical surrounding of any organism. In environment sociology, environment is understood by the interrelations between the biosphere and social life. In generally, what the environment means to us, the environment means the land, the hills, the plains, then trees, and the other uh, biophysical surroundings. That is the environment. But in sociological environment, in sociology, environmental sociology, I'm sorry, in environmental sociology, environment is understood by uh, interrelationship between the biosphere and the social life. In environmental sociology, environment is understood broadly in three categories: natural, In environmental sociology, environment has been defined or has been explained broadly into three categories. That is, first is the natural, that is biophysical environment, that comprising the rivers, mountains, grassland, natural deposits. These are the natural environment. The second one is built environment. What is the built environment? Built environment refers to the highways, factories, parks, residential areas, cities, suburbs, building, etc. And the altered or modified environment that shows their interaction, that is polluted lakes and rivers, planned landscapes of farms, etc. So altered or modified environment, that is when we plant the landscapes or the farms and the polluted rivers and the lakes, right? So these are the three according to environmental sociology. There are the environment could be broadly categorized into three. The first is the natural environment, the second is the built environment, and the third is the altered or modified environment, right? New human ecology. What is new human ecology? Environment sociologists have expanded the scope of subfield beyond the classical human ecology. The rich contribution of scholar to a new domain of new human ecology broadly relates to the idea that sociologists also need to incorporate physical, biological, environment factors while explaining the social processes and interaction. So, new human ecology is when the scholar interrelates or relate the when they incorporate that when the sociologist incorporates the physical, biological and environmental factors in explaining the social process and interactions, while when one is talking about the social process or the interaction, so it is very important to incorporate the environmental factors which impacts the social processes and interaction, how biological factors impacts the social processes or the physical factors impacts the social processes and interaction. So this is new human ecology according to them. It is important to incorporate the physical, biological and environmental factor when someone tries to explain the social processes and interaction. It does include non-social factors too in explaining social conditions. Classical sociologists made conscious efforts to keep distance with the natural sciences, and it led the formation of certain theoretical and methodological rules and values that also kept them aloof from natural environment. So classical sociologists uh, deliberately kept a distance with the natural sciences, and they made the rules and the methodological, they made the theoretical or the methodological rules and values just to keep a distance from the natural environment. New human ecology does represent a view that pattern of social organization are shaped by imperative of human beings to derive their essential need from biophysical environment. Human beings are dependent on biophysical environment for their existential needs. So, according to new human ecology, that social organization can be reshaped or shaped up by the imperatives that the human beings are dependent on the biophysical environment for their needs. So one should, according to new ecological environment, the sociologist should include the physical, biological, and the environmental aspects while studying about the social structure and processes. Environmental attitude, behavior, and practices. Early studies in the field of environmental sociology aimed to explain the public attitudes and behavior related to matter of environment conservation. Broadly, three kind of studies have contributed to the analysis of environmental attitudes, behavior, perception, etc. So, the various studies have been conducted to understand the attitude, to understand the behavior and perception of the human being towards the environment. What is the attitude, behavior, and perception of the society towards the environment? And basically, three kinds of studies have been contributed to analyze this. The first kind of studies mapped how different set of populations see environmental issues. How different set of population sees the environmental issues, whether they consider environment an important issue or not, whether if there is any problem, if there is any environmental issue or a problem, how the people considered or how they see that environmental issues. So they try to map how different set of people see the environmental issue, what is their perception, what is their attitude, and how they behave towards that environmental issue or the problem. In urban areas where consumption of market goods used to be quite high, many scholars have mapped the public mindset related to the practices that preserves ecological life. Recording the environmental concern among the urban dwellers attracted a lot of attention in 1970s because in urban area that the consumption of market good is quite high. So they try to map the public interest or the public perception or attitude towards the ecological problems or the life or the environmental issues, right? So the first type of studies is they try to map the perception, the attitude of the public towards any environmental issues, especially in urban areas, and in 1970s it contributed a lot. The secondly, the studies examine the cognitive aspect related to environmental problems. Sociologists found the level of education, age, political ideology, places of residence, etc., shape the consciousness about the environmental issues and problems. Cognitive aspect, that is the mindset of the people towards the environmental problem. The second kind of studies examining the cognitive aspect, that is the impact of the education, impact of the age, political ideology, places of residence, how they shape up or how they shape the consciousness of the public towards the environmental issues or the problems. And the third type of studies are the sociologists have studied the impact of environment on behaviors. They examine the impact of air pollution on social behavior, floods and huge rains on social mobility and related public health. So they studied the impact of environment on the behavior. When you don't pay attention towards the environmental issues, then because they are interdependent, then definitely society has to suffer. So the third kind of studies, so scholars try to understand the social behavior, that is they examine the impact of environment on the social behavior, how environment impacted the social behavior, like during the floods or the huge rains, how people move from one place to another, how the how the public health is related to the environment. Differential exposure to certain ecological conditions, sewage, pollutants, desertification, landslides, etc. These issues also tells the relevance of relation between the physiological interaction between human being and the environment. The first two type of these studies try to map the attitude, behavior of human beings of the society towards the environment. The second type is the cognitive, that is how the education, what education, age, and political ideologies plays, how these factors play important role in towards the attitude and plays an plays an important role in understanding the environmental issue. The third type of study is how environment impacts the society. So these issues tells us the relevance of the relationship between the humans, between the society and the environment. Next is environmentalism. The term broadly refers to the growing social and political awareness related to the problem of environment and its protection. Environmentalism, that is the awareness, social and political awareness towards the problem of environment. Environmentalism has contributed to public awareness and concern about the market led consumerist approach towards nature, land, biophysical environment, polluting behavior. It has contributed to formation of different agencies at state and civil society levels. So environmentalism is to understand that is to create the awareness, social and political awareness towards the environment, towards the problem of the environment, right? And it has how they this environmentalism has contributed the formation of civil societies and other agencies at the state level so that they can tackle with these environmental problems. Prior to 1960s, the environmentalism was known by its two forms. The first is preservation of natural environment and second is systematic conservation of resources. Environmental movements. Sociologists have examined the connection between the environmental concerns, community livelihood, and social implication of environment model or policy the government begins in. So they try to understand the relation or and the connection between the environmental concerns or the problems, the community livelihood, because we depend that the human society, the human beings depends on the environment for their survival. That is community livelihood and the social implication of environment. They have paid attention to the origin of such environment movement and drawn connections with other socio-cultural and political mobilization. They try to understand various environmental movement and they try to draw a connection between the socio-cultural and political mobilization because of these movements. Much recently, there has been an increased interest in studying the localized and specialized environmental movement. Anti-POSCO protest, anti-nuclear agitations, Chipko movement, Namada Bachao movement are the prime example of such movement in India. Amita Bhaviskar notes that in India and worldwide, activists were classified into two road categories. According to Amita, we can classify the environment activists into two categories. One led by elites and privileged, and secondly, those by the activists who are Marxist. So, according to Amita, right? There are the two categories of activists. One categories of elite and other of Marxist. The first set, that is of elites of environmentalists, were criticized as being elites and privileged in their character with access to state and corporate. These environmentalists were said to be mostly focusing on the issues of wildlife conservation in India. On the other hand, those whom Bhaviskar calls as ecological Marxists are ones who criticize the developmental model practiced in India and resultant displacement of indigenous people in several states. So the Marxist, ecological Marxist, according to Bhaviskar, are those who criticize the developmental model practiced in India, and because of these developmental model, the people have been displaced from their places. Ecological justice. Scholars working on the environmental problem also examine the differential impact of ecological hazards, risks, and problems on the people. Yes, definitely. This environmental problem impacts differently on people. So sociologists try to examine how these environmental problem impacts the different people, that is the different races, different people in different ways. How it impacts. The contemporary concern in discipline has been to locate the cause of environmental problem in relation to production. Explaining the distribution of consequences in terms of racial, gender, class, and geopolitical inequalities, and exploring the ways in which political institutions and social movements shape the environmental policies. So, these environmental problem or environmental issues impact people in different ways. Sociologists tried to explain the consequences of environmental problem in terms of race, in terms of gender, because uh, gender impacted in the different ways. How the inequalities, geopolitical inequalities, how these impacts the geopolitical inequalities. So they try to understand the impact of environment on the basis of inequalities. Some scholars who follow the political economy approach in study of environment recognize that environmental problems have material dimensions. So, according to some scholars who follow the political economy approach, according to them, the environmental problem have material dimensions. Water pollution, air pollution, soil erosions, and deforestation make some people wealthy and make some other people sick, and it threatens their livelihoods and increase the risk of injury, economic misery, and displacement. So they try to explain the impact of environmental issues on the different set of people or on the different set of societies, right? They try to explain the impact of environment on the basis of inequalities, right? Some scholars say that these environmental issues, the problem have material dimensions, because these water problem, air problem, and soil erosion make some people wealthy, while it impacts the livelihood of others. The unequal social distribution of environmental hazard is another central area of environmental sociological research. The foundation principle behind the concept of environmental justice is that all people, irrespective of their race, irrespective of their class, gender, sexuality, are entitled to protection from the environmental risks, disaster, pollutions, and hazards. So everyone should get their justice. Environmental justice should be there. The idea of environmental justice means that the environmental goods, that is the green lands, clean air, water, better soil, fertile lands, etc., and environmental bads, that is the pollution, waste, hazard, etc., must be equitably distributed among all people irrespective of their social background. So goods and environmental bad should be equally distributed among all people irrespective of their social background, irrespective of their sexuality, irrespective of their wealth conditions. Environmental risks and hazards. Environmental sociologists explore the risks people face in their environmental context, and the environmental degradation has threatened the human society worldwide. Some are more vulnerable to its impact and consequences, while others are not. Sociologists investigate the unequal distribution of impact of both technical disaster, that is reactor meltdown, toxic leak, explosion, oil spills, etc., and the natural disasters, that is the earthquake, landslides, etc. In India, indigenous community, the landless worker, the poor, and the underprivileged are the worst victim of both kinds of the disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or the technical disaster. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Namaskar.